Welcome to Character Explorations, a podcast production of the Wendt Center for Character Education at the University of Dubuque. I'm Annalee Ward, the director of the Wendt Center, and with me today is Dr. Peg Kerr, professor of nursing. She has spent time also thinking about hospitality, homemaking, and both of these ideas as a moral imperative. Now, some of our conversation today is based on an article she wrote in our journal issue, Character and the Places of Home, available online at dbq.edu/Wendt, W-E-N-D-T. Dr. Kerr has practiced in the clinical setting, taught in the classroom and the lab, and led UD's nursing program to its reputation for excellence. Today, we'd like to focus on what some have described as mundane and others as holy work, the hospitality of homemaking. Peg, you've been a busy professional with a full home life, kids, husband. How did you come to be interested in and write about this topic?
Well, having been busy and very engaged in my career is one of the reasons I got interested, because I could see that it was probably lacking in my life. When I was a young wife and mother in my early 30s, I was first exposed to this idea by a writer named Alexandra Stoddard, who wrote a series of books that began with one called Making a Beautiful Life. And she introduced me to some ideas I'd never really thought of in terms of homemaking, its impact on others, and how we could affect that. And so I've always had that interest, and I refer to my Pinterest obsession in the beginning of the article and throughout. And I kept seeing all these images and loving them and thinking it was just out of my reach.
Images of what?
Images of beautiful homes, entertaining, well-set tables, recipes, just the whole bringing people into your home, a beautiful home. And it was seeming out of reach to me.
Well, if you're going to talk about hospitality, I might be one of those listeners who fears you're going to lay a guilt trip on me. I mean, it is out of reach for busy people. Do we have to have these perfect shiny homes and host gatherings and keep our professional and personal lives going and have it all? That's hospitality, right?
Actually, there's a lot of people writing about this topic. I had no idea until I really started to get into it. And that is our image. But is that a true image? We put a lot of focus on the entertainment aspect of hospitality. But is that really what it is? And a lot of the people writing about this argue that there's so much more to that, a moral Christian imperative. The emphasis should be on others. It's when the emphasis becomes on yourself and what your house looks like and your life that we start to lose the true meaning of hospitality.
So you've mentioned that it relates to Christianity. Where do you see hospitality and Christianity coming together?
Well, hospitality is made reference to throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. Abraham and Sarah, when they had their visitors, they butchered their prime steer and made the best bread and opened their home to them. And lo and behold, who did it turn out to be? But prophets foretelling them that they were going to have a son. And so that's an example from the Old Testament. There are others. The New Testament, Jesus was all about it, eating with the money changers and with people that others looked down on him for, spending time with. And Jesus didn't start missions, and he didn't start initiatives and all these things. Jesus had meals with people, and that was his ministry, a large part of it. And I think one of the most poignant scenes of this was after his resurrection, when the disciples were out in the fishing boat and they were not having any luck and they were exhausted and they were afraid at that time. And Jesus came on the beach. They did not recognize him, but he started a charcoal fire. He was cooking fish. As they got closer, he beckoned them and said, "Come have breakfast." And I just think that, that is just one of the examples of his efforts at hospitality, which was his ministry.
It's a great example of thinking about others' needs, isn't it? You've raised examples where people put themselves second and others first. That's a whole different way of thinking about hospitality than, okay, I've got everything lined up and perfect. We're going to create this beautiful space. Now you can come in. Well, you talk about homemaking, though, as an important concept in all of this. I mean, to me, my first idea is homemaking. That's 1950s. There comes the guilt again, the pressure to be perfect. What do you mean by homemaking?
Stephen March wrote an article for the New York Times that I mentioned in the article, in which he says, yes, those tasks are drudgery, but he also refers to them as little tendernesses. It's those things that we do for others, not to show off our home or what we've done there, accomplished, what we have, but when you're doing it for others, that's when it becomes holy, essentially. Some of the writers even referred to those actions and those efforts on behalf of others as sacramental. And that was a new concept to me. And, that day-to-day routine that we do, but we're doing it prayerfully. And we are thinking about why we're doing it and for whom we're doing it. And in that sense, it does become holy and takes on a whole new significance. And I think that is the way we should be looking at homemaking and being grateful for those who do that for us.
You cite Tish Harrison Warren, who quotes the New Monastic Christian Community sign, which I just love. Do you remember what that was?
I believe it was something like, everyone wants a revolution, but nobody wants to do the dishes.
How apt that is. I want hospitality to be perfect. The everyday, the mundaneness of our hospitality requires that somebody do the dishes, that somebody get the groceries, that somebody do all of this. Are you suggesting that even the preparation is a spiritual practice?
I am, and so are a lot of these authors, Tish Harrison included. In the case of homemaking, to see God's presence in the practice of the mundane and appreciate the holiness and the goodness of the work of making a home a place of hospitality is important and changes the whole perspective on it.
It does. It's a good challenge. We want to be hospitable. We want to reframe our thoughts, and rather than thinking about just being focused on how things look, we want to focus on the other person and focus on God as we prepare. That's what I'm hearing you say. Who needs our hospitality?
That's a really good question. And, when we think of this, of course, Mother Teresa was radical in her views on hospitality. She said, "I see the face of Jesus in all the faces of others." And Jesus himself practiced a radical form of hospitality. Most of us probably aren't ready to go there right now. But if we think about it, we live in a world that people are disconnected. People are mobile. People are oftentimes displaced. And So, if we just can see it, you have to see it in others and not necessarily strangers, although we talk about being hospitable to strangers, but in the people we know that we encounter every day, family members, neighbors, the lady down the street who just lost her husband, our students. They can all be in need of hospitality. I think of, especially during this pandemic, my own grown children with who have their own young children who were working from home, who the daycares were closed and they were exhausted and frazzled, and it's difficult just to get to the store, buy groceries, take care of their families. And so that I recognized that they were in need of hospitality. So taking them a meal, sharing it with them, inviting them to our home when it was safe to do so. Those are people too who need it. And we can start there, and it's a good place to start. Like Mother Teresa said, if you want to make the world a better place, go home and love your family. And so it's a good place for people to start.
We don't often think about our family as in being in need of hospitality. And that's a beautiful reminder that that's where we need to look to, not just the stranger. I think that can be really intimidating for people, thinking, I don't really know my neighbors. How do I begin? Do you have any suggestions for how we can begin to be hospitable?
One of the people that I referenced in the article said, just open your door and invite people in. And that sounds easy, but it isn't always so easy. One of the things is when you invite people into your home, you're also inviting them into your life. And all of us have perfect lives. And so it makes us vulnerable. And that can be difficult, and it needs to be recognized. But if you think about your own experiences and others in providing hospitality to you, I know that when I get invited to somebody's house for dinner, I'm grateful. And I walk in, I don't care if there's dishes in the sink or dust on the floor. I mean, you are feeling gratitude that they invited you, that they thought of you. And so we need to, think about that. Again, when you're thinking like that, you're putting the emphasis on yourself, not on others. And so I guess opening your door and inviting them in might be a place to consider starting.
Does it matter what our homes look like?
It matters to an extent, because when you take the effort, people recognize that. And again, it's those little tendernesses. But it's not that it's a fancy home or, silver place settings. That's not the point. The point is, are people thriving in your home? That's a sign of a hospitable home. What's what makes it that the other people in there are doing well and they're thriving, and that it's comfortable, and that there are little touches, a meal maybe. It doesn't have to be, a gourmet meal. It can be a pot of stew. It can be takeout pizza. It doesn't matter. I know I'm not picky when I get invited to other places. Maybe a bowl of flowers on the table that, you grabbed on your way in. I had a girlfriend growing up, and her mother their house was chaos and pets and dogs and cat hair everywhere. But she would do things like, kids, I made ice cream, and she'd go out the front door and gather mint leaves off her little herb garden. And I mean, just those little touches. And it doesn't have to be major. So no, it doesn't have to be perfect. And again, if you think it has to be, again, you're putting the emphasis on yourself and not them.
You cited in their Kristen Shields' book, The Turquoise Table, as one example of a way to be hospitable. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, she had the idea she took a picnic table, painted it a bright turquoise color, and put it in her front yard. And over time, what she hoped would happen happened. People just started stopping by. Neighbors walking their dogs, people driving by, delivery people. And at some point, the table was full a lot of the day. She said she just started by taking her cup of coffee out in the morning and sitting there. And eventually it started to draw people. And actually, the turquoise table has become an international movement. If you Google it, you'll see her web pages and her examples and photos of other people who have done the same thing. That would be a good place to start as well. We don't often use our front yards anymore. Everybody's sequestered in the backyard on the deck or the patio. But that front yard, front porch idea, the turquoise table, great ideas.
Thank you for that. I think just being reminded that it doesn't have to be an exceptional expenditure of energy, that we can simply begin where we are with the lives that we lead already is an important reminder for what hospitality is. James K. Smith argues, what we do is driven by who we are, by the kind of person we have become. Peg, you've reminded us that self-reflection on our practices reveals the gap between aspiration and reality. Yet you've encouraged us to invite others authentically into this reality of our lives before we achieve some perfect vision. The practice of hospitality impacts our character and responds to that Christian calling to love our neighbors. Thank you, Dr. Peg Kerr, for this beautiful reminder today.
Thank you, Dr. Ward.